And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Talk podcast. I'm your host, Harrison Arena. Alongside me, co-host Dan Kiley. Episode 104 of the Talk podcast. Pretty good weekend. Pretty good weekend for the Bulldogs, for college football as a whole, for the NFL as a whole. Not for the Dallas Cowboys, but we won't talk about that. We're not here to talk about that. Dan, how are you doing this Tuesday evening?
I am doing well. I am excited to do the show because we have a lot of stuff to talk about.
We spoke pre-show about it, kind of feeling like a little bit re-energized, some new talking points, not really talking about the same thing over and over again. And mainly that's due to the fact that Georgia played up to expectation for the first time this season. And we're going to get to that later. We don't give away the main event, the reason everybody's here at the beginning of the show. We kind of lead you up to it, get you ready to go, get saddled up. With that being said, let's get ready to go. Hot topic number one. Dan, if you were starting a sports team today, what would your mascot be?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I don't necessarily have an answer that I'm 100% firm on. But the reason I thought of this question is because I get so bored with the same old stuff, right? Like every single time that a team, starts up, they're the Bears, they're the Dogs, or the Cats, or the Mountain Lion. I mean, like it's just always the same stuff. It gets so crazy and it's so boring. Like, for example, Seconder opened up right across the street, and they're the Jaguars, and they look just like Jacksonville Jaguars, which is pretty cool, right? But imagine like the Seconder Seahawks. There are no Seahawks anywhere in Georgia. That would have been really cool. They could have used a really cool, but then somebody said they look like Discovery. But like when Discovery was opening up, like maybe you don't know, but like there was a one of the space shuttles was Discovery. So I thought it would be really cool to be like Discovery rockets or something like that because there's not really a whole lot of rockets. So I just thought that would be cool. So for me, I would want it to be something that stands out, something to be a little bit different, not something that you would hear all the time. So, if I was starting a new franchise, like if I was starting another, like a 15th hockey team here in Georgia, and it was a, NHL team, like what would you want to name it? Like we had the Thrashers and, that was cool, whatever. But, like, I don't know. I, I, I just don't want it to be something stupid. Harrison, what do you have? And let me think on this a little bit more because I'm stuck now because I didn't know I was going to go the hockey route, but I was just watching the hockey game. So I was like, oh, maybe I should try a hockey game. But then I just blanked. So, like, if you were going to start a team, first of all, like, where would you be, right? What kind of team would it be? And then what kind of name would you go with?
Dan, thank you for bringing up hockey because I was sitting here, I was leading one direction, was like kind of like you, was going to say, okay, we're gonna go. If I'm opening up a high school, I'm just gonna go take one of the pro teams or the college teams mascot. Then you say hockey, and there's just like an empty place here in Atlanta. Atlanta is the mecca for all things like sports entertainment. Not really entertainment. Well, I'll say entertainment. Like obviously Hollywood's there, New York's there, but Atlanta just has everything except one thing. One big gap, Dan. The Flames. Give me the Flames. Give me the Atlanta Flames. Bring hockey back to the city of Atlanta. I'm going with the Flames because that is a bat. Or no, it was the Flashers. What am I thinking? The Thrashers. Or am I just totally off base? Am I just out of it
Atlanta
today?
was the Flames, but now they're Calgary Flames, so you can't be the Flames anymore.
Yeah. The Flames was cool. Thrashers is even better to me. For like a just for something. Yeah, I don't mind. There's a small college in North Carolina called the Whirlies, which is pretty cool. Tornadoes, stuff like that. But I wanted something beast like the Tigers. That'd be nice. Like, give me a live mascot, a tiger, like Mike the
Mm-hmm.
Tiger for LSU. That's cool.
Yeah, but
Obviously,
there's so many tigers. So all right, I have it. You ready for
if you
Atlanta?
say horned frogs, I'm gonna have to bring up the Six
No,
Bucks.
no, 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 no. So like what did we just talk about? There's always traffic in Atlanta, right? So if Atlanta gets another hockey team, they're called the Atlanta Slammers. Traffic jam, always slam traffic. In hockey, you hit, slam. So the Atlanta Slammers. I don't think there's another team called the Slammers. That would be kind of cool. I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but like that's my whole point is that I hate the repetitive names. Jeremiah is late, but he's here. Jeremiah, if you were going to name your own sports team, what would you call it? All right.
Slammers isn't bad. I would go for maybe the Maniacs because nothing like driving through Atlanta at rush hour and just totally you'll be surprised by what some people do in traffic. But anyways, Dan, hot topic number 2. What team do you enjoy most? Oh, damn, I messed this up. What team do you enjoy watching lose the most? I have my answer. This is a no-brainer for me. So go ahead.
Yeah, for me, it's real simple. It's the New York Yankees. I hate the freaking New York Yankees. I hate Yankees fans. I hate anything about the damn Yankees. The Yankees have broken my heart more times than any other team that I can think of. I just hate the damn Yankees, and they're so good, and they are the franchise that everybody should want to be. I mean, hell, you cannot wear a single digit for the New York Yankees because they're all retired. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Every last one of them. Hell, I think 10's even retired. I don't know if 0's retired. Maybe it is. I'm not sure. But Atlanta Magic. That would be badass.
Oh,
yes.
Man.
Listen, I said no repetitive names, but Jeremiah, I will allow it. Thank you for not heading out.
One. That's a good one.
Thank you for not heading out, Jeremiah. You're my boy.
That's going to take the cake today. That's taking the cake today. Dan, continue on, sir.
Yeah, so for me, it's the Yankees. All right, who you got?
Damn, Dan. Really? The Yankees?
Dude,
give me the goddamn Mets. Let the Mets lose all the time. And my hate, it's not even the hate that I have for the Mets. Like, I don't like the Mets. I hate, trust me, losing to the Mets suck. But I'm not, as Braves fan, I'm probably not, maybe it's not as front and center for me. In my lifetime, at least, of the Mets winning. I haven't seen the Mets win really big at all in my lifetime. I think the last time they were really anything in my lifetime was when Matt Harvey was pitching, and that's a name to bring out of your backside right there, Matt Harvey. Anybody remember who Matt Harvey was? Pretty good pitcher until he got dinged for, I don't know, I think he was taking PEDs or something, and fell off the face of the earth at this point. But yeah, they went to the World Series that year. Ever since then, they've been nothing. Had a few good years. They were overhyped, had a big budget, big payroll, and they absolutely sucked. But when the Mets lose, Dan, Frank the Tank is my choice of entertainment from Barstool Sports. If you know what I'm talking about, Frank the Tank.
Oh, I love Frank. He is my one of my guilty pleasure watches on Twitter.
It is amazing. I will go watch that guy's live stream when he's watching along the Mets against the Braves. Is the best thing of all time. Somebody bought him a stock of the Atlanta Braves at the office, and dude opens it and says, "Can I trade Acuna?" And I just start dying. Like, I will watch the Mets lose, not because of my hate for them. I have some other teams that I hate more, sports teams I hate more, that I would watch lose and enjoy. But man, anytime the Mets lose, I'm logging in to Frank the Tank to go watch that. I love his reaction to when I think it was Albies hit the game winning home run, and Arcia hit the game tying home run. Our group chat was going off that night because that was the night that Chipper, Schmaltz, and I forget who the other one was, had the all-star commentary. It was perfect.
Glavine.
Great commentary. Glavine. Great commentary, great game. Our group chat was going off because of the memes that we were just pulling out of the Mets losing. Yeah, so Mets for me, Dan. College football, for me, I love watching Florida and Tennessee flop because those are the two fan bases that I come across the most. And when they do lose, whether they're good or they're bad, it's a meltdown. You think Rome fell. You think they were living back in, back when Rome was the empire. Like, it just, sky's falling, everything's bad. I'm sure Georgia's probably the same way, especially these days when Georgia loses for the first time in, I think it's been 600 days. The sky is going to be falling. I'm sure of it. But anyways, that's my pedestal for the day, Dan. Mets haven't won since 1986, but the fans act like they win every year, says Jeremiah. It's about accurate. Yankees haven't won since 2009, so I don't care about them.
Yeah,
About
but the
accurate?
reason I love to watch the Yankees fans lose is because they don't expect to lose. You know, it's like they
Interesting.
have that royalty to them where they expect to win all the time, kind of like Lakers fans. Like they think they should win everything. And it's like, bro, you're not even that good. But
It's interesting, Dan, because obviously, people make fun of me not being able to, grow a beard like you and our age difference and all that. But there's two different perspectives here. Dan grew up a day and age where, correct me if I'm wrong, the Lakers and the Celtics were pretty dominant. I want to say, like in
they were
basketball
the only
terms,
two. They were the only two basketball teams in the whole world that mattered.
baseball was the Yankees, and the Braves were in the '90s, obviously, team in the '90s. Um, College football was kind of, it felt like a pendulum.
College football didn't exist.
Yeah, kind of a pendulum there, and the NFL, kind of the same way, was a pendulum back then. But yeah, I can assume. Dan, I'm kind of surprised you didn't say Dallas Cowboys, but I know you're not
When I was a kid, I
my
liked the
Dallas Cowboy
Cowboys.
hater. Come on back to me, Dan. Come back to me, please.
I can't do it.
Come on back, dude. The
Oh, when I
Falcons
was
make
a
me
kid, I
miserable.
mean, when I was a kid, I jumped from team to team like every other little kid does. Like I liked the 49ers. I like my first love was the 49ers. Well, Packers I always liked them, but my first love was the 49ers, and then with Joe Montana, and I loved them. And then they kind of passed the torch to the Cowboys and
It
then
was
the
Herschel
triplets.
Walker that brought you over, wasn't it?
No, it was not.
Oh,
I
it
didn't
wasn't.
know who Georgia was. That
Okay.
Georgia didn't even exist in my mind. Um, and so I like the triplets with the Cowboys, and then I moved on. Who did I like after that? I guess I just became a Falcons fan after that. But yeah, I mean, like I don't know. Y'all just got real quiet. What's up? What's up?
No, you're good. You're good. You hear me?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right.
He
All right.
he said we got real quiet.
Oh, no, we're good. Yeah. Anyways, Dan, Jerry Jones, if you're listening, bring back the triplets and Dan's back on board, is what I'm hearing. Bring back the triplets and Dan's back on board. Dan, we got a good rant for everybody today. This one, I don't know when Dan decided he wanted to do this. I don't know if
I
he
can
came up
tell
with
you
this last week,
today.
but today? Okay. What perfectly aligns with what the news story is today. So, Dan, take it away.
So for me, I was in the middle of doing something, and I'm going to read you this quote that somebody put out, and then I stole it and used it today. But it says, "Be careful of what you hear about somebody. You might be hearing it from the problem." And just think about that for a second. Let that resonate in your mind. And it got me to thinking today, how unfortunate it is that there are people in this world when things don't go right for them, they like to cause trouble. Like you put a quote in here, some men just want to see the world burn. Like, yeah, that's exactly right. Because there are some people who they thrive and they enjoy causing problems. And they're like little snakes in the grass, right? You never see them, you never hear them. They hide out, but they love to drop these little tidbits of information, and well, it's really misinformation, and they like to cause problems. And I think we've all been guilty or a victim of this at some point or another, where either we were in a conversation where somebody was talking bad about somebody, then it got attributed to us. And it's usually that person who's talking bad. They like to say, "Oh, it wasn't me who said it. It was Harrison that said it." Or they like to come to you and they like to give you information about somebody else that's not necessarily true. But there's always that thread of truth in there that makes you think that possibly it is true. And that's what gets you in trouble. But it's just the shit stirs, like the people who just always want to cause problems in your life. And how awesome would it be if we could eliminate all those people from our lives because you don't need that negativity? But at the same time, when you hear gossip and you hear stuff like that, but you just have to let it go. And I am so guilty. I have been right there where I wanted to hear it, I wanted to talk it, and what ends up happening is you end up losing good friends or people you thought you were good friends, or it really puts you in a bad light. Like I put today on my social media is that I've been guilty of that before, and I'm the one that ended up looking like a fool, right? So just save yourself a lot of problems. Don't look like the fool. And the reason this is really resonates today is because there's another person in the media who decided that they wanted to start a little shit, cause a little problem. And it's a half truth, right? And that's how all of this starts. It's a half truth. And we're talking about Jimbo, or we're talking about Stoops. And Stoops decided that he wanted to go out on his call-in show. And Harrison, you can go ahead and join me now. I'm doing my little mini rant. But Stoops decided he was going to take a shot at Georgia because he just got his ass whipped. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, things are not going right in his world. So how does he make himself look better? And he takes the classic shot. Well, we need more money because Georgia's bought some really good players. So go ahead and play that clip for them, just so they know we're not making this up. This is real.
Shout out to the UK Healthcare Mark Stoops show. Credit for the clip.
Complain, deny, or make excuses, and we're not going to do that. It is what it is, and fans have that right. I give it to them. I just encourage them to donate more because that's what those teams are doing. I could promise you in Georgia, they bought some pretty good players. You're allowed to these days, and we could use some help. That's what they look like. You know what I mean? When you have 85 of them. So I encourage anybody that's disgruntled to pony up some more.
Davis,
the others.
Pretty interesting stuff. The last time that we heard something like this said in regards to playing players, the last head coach to do this was Nick Saban. And honestly, Dan, your quote that you came up with today about say it again. It was the people who say that again.
I said, be careful with what you hear about somebody. You might be hearing it from the problem.
It reminds me of Nick Saban's comments on Jimbo at that Alabama booster meeting, where Nick Saban's out here saying that somebody else went out and bought his whole class, when really, in reality, pretty much everybody was doing it. Everybody just got brought into full light here. Like, I'm not saying Nick Saban's the problem, but he's part of the problem. Every coach in college football that's doing it is part of the problem here. And Mark Stoops, I'm pretty sure that you may be part of the problem. Whether or not you're doing as successfully as others can be determined where you rank in recruitment rings. Kirby Smart, as everybody would get or predict, did respond to this. Now it didn't come till later in the day. It didn't come until his press conference, because he probably would much rather not have answered to this. But part of me thinks that he likes stuff like this happening, where it takes up a question in his press conferences, because he doesn't really have to go into the detail about what's going on with his football team, or he really, to me, it just seems like a question off for him, because he already has his answer pre-made for him. Like, it's already written down. He already has it in front of him. He knows what he's going to say because he's expecting it. He said, when asked for reaction report, he says, and I quote, "No reaction. It's much to do about nothing, really. Mark is trying to garner interest and money from his fan base for his collective. We're all trying to do the same in terms of trying to get money for our collective. Mark and I talked about NIL pregame, and we talked about it in our meetings. I'm not biting on that." Dan, pretty lame, or not even lame, pretty just laid back response. Like, didn't really deny anything, which kind of surprised me. I thought he would maybe come out here and say, no, we're not paying anybody. We're just doing what we're allowed to do. But I mean, he's not wrong here. Like, Mark Stoops is pretty genius for this, because not only is that going to get attention from fans, Kentucky fans and boosters, that's going to get the attention of the whole college football world. That is headline front page news today. So shout out to you, Mark Stoops, for calling out here.
You know what, though?
Your way to say that.
That's exactly what my rant was about. Shit starters. He's diverting the attention from the fact that he did a horrible job of preparing his football team to play in Athens. And we both had a kind of a feeling that it might go that way. But this is his opportunity to deflect. And that's why I put this up here. This is Jeremiah's comment. What a coward, blaming it on funds instead of taking the accountability of his terrible coaching. And I agree 100% with you, Jeremiah. Wholeheartedly, I agree with you. That's all this is an opportunity to deflect, because Georgia has been very, very transparent with what they are and what they are not doing on the collective, right? So Georgia has not been blatantly paying these guys just a massive amounts of money to come play football here, because look at what USC is doing. They are putting guys up in suites that are in downtown Los Angeles. Look at what Bear Alexander, he got, was it a Porsche or a Mercedes SUV? I mean, so he, and USC is just providing all this stuff. Texas A&M, 100% pay for play, which is not supposed to be going on. Miami has a lawyer setting up these collectives for these players where they're getting millions of dollars. Tennessee, I mean, it's well known. What?
Utah bought people cars, bought their whole program cars. Was it Utah? Was it? You
Yeah, it
sent
was-
it. I remember you sent it to me. It was
Utah.
Utah.
Tennessee is paying Nico, what was it, $5 million or $6 million or something like that?
Rumored. Yeah.
Okay, but name one player that's come out that Georgia has ponied up the money from. The only massive NIL deal that I've heard come out of Georgia was at the very beginning, and it was JT Daniels, where he got a really big deal from somebody, the car dealership, or maybe it was Zaxby's or something like. It was a big deal, and he ended up splitting that money among all of his teammates. So he didn't personally keep it, which, you know, it's not for nothing. He's not even here anymore. It doesn't matter. But, you know, Stetson Bennett should have had massive. I mean, listen, Stetson Bennett cashed his in to get a whole case full of Old Pappy, which, you know, if you're doing the math on that, if you do 12 bottles at $10,000, that's $120,000. That's still not that big of a deal.
And I'm sure he's still betting from those national championships. He can go to downtown Athens and he's eating for free.
Yeah. But I mean, my whole thing is that the only real thing that I heard coming out of Athens, and maybe you can correct me on this, is a lot of people are saying that one of those dealerships has got the deal that's giving all these guys Hellcats and these souped up cars, and that may be the case, but that's not Georgia doing it, right? But I mean, we are losing all these players, you know, air quotes, and I mean, we can't prove it or whatever, but we're losing all these guys to the bags, like Texas A&M throwing a bag at everybody. How many recruits we lost to them? Auburn, I know, is offering up big amounts of money right now. I have an inside track on that one. I could tell you names if you wanted to know them, but Auburn is paying, and Miami is paying. I mean, hell, Nycar just flipped. Bag, right? I mean, that's what everybody says. So, I think it's ironic that he chose Georgia because that's the one school where in Alabama too. Alabama, well, I think Nico, or not Nico. What's his name? Bryant. Oh my gosh, the guy who was just the number one pick, Bryce Young. I think Bryce Young's deal was only like $3 million, and I think it was deferred. So I don't like Georgia and Alabama are really not out here throwing cash around, but they don't have to because they've built a stellar program that is built on results. Yes, they have a collective, but if I'm not mistaken, that collective goes equally to every player on scholarship, does it not?
I don't know the whole details around the collective. That's something that we may be able to pull it off. We may be able to get somebody from the collective on here to talk about all that details, get a lot of the questions answered. We may do that here eventually in the future. I know, you know, obviously we've had Aaron Murray on here, and he's a big part of the Players Lounge. Probably can answer some of those questions. But yeah, I mean, like Dan said, Georgia also has the resume behind them. Same thing with Alabama in regards to people putting, in regards to players being put in the league and winning national championships. Obviously, Georgia has got that national championship reputation developed here recently. But still, I mean, since Kirby Smart took over the program, they're having guys drafted left and right in the NFL draft. Like they're getting first round picks almost every year. I can't remember the last time Georgia hasn't had a first round pick in an NFL draft. I wanted to point out it was a retweet from JD Piquel, who works for On3, said personal opinion, and I quote: primary reason kids commit to Georgia is because they get players developed and drafted. I think that's something that's being left out. Like, obviously, I'm not coming out here, and people aren't coming out here and saying, like, hey, kids are going to Georgia because they love Georgia, and that's the team they, you know, grew up supporting. Being able to get developed, being able to get paid while you're in school, whether it's, you know, through NIL or not, that's obviously a big deal in today's day and age. We went years. Dan, you were a college athlete. You know what it was like back in the day, maybe getting, I don't even know if they had a stipend when you were playing. They had a stipend recently. You know, they've had a stipend that players got. I think it was monthly I don't know how often they got it a few years ago, but that was kind of what they got for food, for books, stuff like that. Anyways, whatever they needed, they had the stipend. But now you have NIL. These kids are able to support themselves, do what they need, support their families. So obviously, it's a no-brainer. That's going to factor into many kids' decision. All right, from Mark Stoops to Kentucky and Georgia itself, the game itself. like I said, at the beginning of the show, Dan and I kind of both felt kind of re-energized in an extent that we ain't talking about the same things. The takeaways from this past Georgia game, are a lot different than what we've had over the last few weeks. Not to say that we've been all doom and gloom over here. Dan and I certainly haven't been the ones backtracking and saying this Georgia team's not good. In fact, I think we've probably been spending a lot of the show on defense against the people like that. Whether or not Georgia's still the same football team. Because as Dan said pre-show, when we talked about it, Georgia's not a bad football team by any means. I don't think the expectations have changed in that program. I don't think the expectations have changed outside the program in regards to whether or not they're going to challenge for national title. I think the same has remained the same, even though they haven't looked as dominant as they have recently. And I just saw your message, Dan. Yes, I accidentally skipped over that. We'll touch on that here at the end of the show now.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, Dan, let's get first thoughts and impressions. Dan, this was your first, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first game you've been able to watch live this year.
I missed the opening
that made
kickoff.
a hell of a difference.
I missed the opening kickoff, and then outside of that, I watched the entire game. This was the first time all season long that I've actually got to enjoy the game, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, but it's kind of ridiculous also because
Georgia's best game yet too.
I know you only get so many of these, and I just but here's my thing, and this is what we had our conversation about earlier today was, you made a comment to me last week that I did not seem like I was interested in doing the show at all. Like you were flat, like you just didn't have it. And I'm like, you're right, I didn't, because I was exhausted of coming on the show, talking about the same things every single week, telling people that this Georgia team is not that bad. It's just the fact that they were bored. They didn't have anybody to play. And I really felt like this was an opportunity with a ranked team coming in at home at night, for the world to see on ESPN, that this team was going to finally be motivated to play a football game. And I'll be damned if they didn't. They came out opening drive and just ran it right down their throat. And Beck looked crisp. And I was really excited to see that Georgia finally kind of admitted to themselves, we are a throwing football team, and we're going to let Carson Beck cook. And my God, did he cook. He looked incredible. He threw the ball as well as I've seen a Georgia quarterback throw it in a really, really long time. So, and keep in mind, we're coming off of Stetson Bennett, who just won 2 national titles and could sling the shit out of it. So, I mean, that's really saying something. But I thought Carson looked amazing. My initial thought was I was really happy to see us come out up tempo and just let them sling it. And, just kind of admit to the world that we're a throwing football team now.
Yeah, I mean, you finally get the monkey off your back that is the Bobo haters and the Beck haters. Like, I don't think there is a person in this fan base this week that will come out here and say that Georgia doesn't have the right guy at quarterback and Georgia doesn't have the right guy in the booth calling the shots. Mike Bobo came out here and threw the absolute book at the Georgia fans. Just flew up the Johnny Estrada double barrel, as Dan says, and said, I'm going to put up 51 on the number 20 ranked team in the country. By God, they did look impressive. 28 of 35 passing, 389 yards, 4 touchdowns. The lone blemish on his record, I talked about with this Dan pre-show, our weekly Tuesday conversation. I wish that interception was on there. And, obviously nobody's focusing on that because really the dude played great even with that. But, man, it would just be nice to see that goose egg in the interception column just make a perfect night even more perfect. Carson Beck could do no wrong Saturday night. And, Dan, there's people on Twitter, a lot smarter people than you and I when it comes to breaking down football and all that. People that, we probably go to and look at for their opinions because we see them as credible. Cole Kublik posted 2 amazing plays by Carson Beck. One was the completion first touchdown of the game to Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. That ball jumped. I mean, just jumps off his hands. Like you said it best. Carson Beck is one of the best pure throws of football that we've watched here at Georgia in a pretty long time. Like, obviously, we had Stetson Bennett last year. I wouldn't say Stetson Bennett is like Stetson Bennett wasn't. When I'm talking about pure throws of football, and what Dan's saying is we're comparing, the way Carson Beck's ball jumps off his hands to somebody like Anthony Richardson. I'm not saying he's Anthony Richardson anyway. Anthony Richardson throws gas, but Carson Beck also throws gas. Kind of unlike we've seen. I mean, I don't want to say Matthew Stafford-like because that's a high bar, But I mean, Dan, where do you rank him? Because to me,
Just pure arm
recently,
talent.
yeah, pure arm talent among recent
I
Georgia
mean,
quarterbacks.
pure arm talent. Obviously, you got to go Stafford 1, but I would say Jacob Eason probably at number 2, and then Beck at 3. I mean, obviously, Jacob Eason couldn't put it together, but just pure arm. I mean, like Jeff George probably had the best arm ever in pro football, or Brett Favre, one of those two. But I mean, so saying that Jacob Eason had a better arm doesn't mean anything, because we know it didn't translate. I mean, Aaron Murray and Stetson Bennett are probably the 2 best quarterbacks Georgia's ever had, but I don't think anybody would put them 1 and 2 in any arm categories. But although the crazy thing is Stetson's arm was way better than people give it credit for. He could zip the shit out of the ball. He had a lot of Brett Favre in him, maybe just didn't have that fastball that Brett Favre has, but I don't know. For me, it would be like, I would say he's top 3 or top 4.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. Yeah, Zach, thank you for that one, buddy.
No, that's Jeremiah. Oh.
Zach prompted that one. Zach's coming for people's heads today. Came at my head, and Dak Prescott's head. Now he's coming at Justin Fields. Hey,
he saw my rant shit stir, and he's like, "Oh, I am applying for that job."
Yeah, so Carson Beck is up there in terms of arm talent, NFL arm talent. That was the one thing that everybody said when Jacob Eason coming out, like, this guy's an NFL arm, point blank. Now, I think what separates Carson Beck from Jacob Eason is the mental side of football. Like, when you watch Carson Beck play, that is one confident dude. Like, for somebody that is bereft of experience, starting experience, he is, I think, 6 starts in now to his college career. He's playing like he's played double-digit games already. Like, you watch him in his drop back, you watch his footwork, he is very confident in his reads. He gets through his reads. He processes at a very high level. That I'm not quite used to seeing from a first-year starter.
Yeah, if you go back and watch Jacob Eason play that year that Fromm wasn't there, so the year that he was there by himself, he was extremely confident and he was really good. But I just think, like, whenever he had another alpha in the room with him, he couldn't handle it, because, whether you like Jake Fromm or not, whether you think he was a good quarterback or not, Jake Fromm was an alpha, and he won that locker room over in a hurry, and that's why Jacob never got that team back. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. And I don't know. We are sidetracking today a little bit, aren't we? But one thing that you and I didn't talk about pre-show or anything, and I was just kind of really paying attention to it, is Georgia had the number 20 team in on, right? So, like, in theory, it's the absolute toughest competition we've had all year. We scored the most points we scored the entire year. We beat the number 20 team worse than we beat UAB. We beat Kentucky 51-13, and I can't remember what the UAB score is. It was 49-21. So we beat freaking Kentucky, number 20 in the country, undefeated, beat them worse than we beat UAB. So we scored 49 against UAB. I think we scored 48 against UT Martin. So we scored 51. That's just crazy to me how this team operates. And like we said, we were hinting at it, and we weren't necessarily calling them sleepwalking, but we kind of, like, they just didn't feel motivated like they wanted to play. But I was getting exhausted from coming out saying this is a good football team. They just have to be challenged. It's a good football. And like, it was so hard to defend it because they're like, this team's terrible. They can't do anything, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, you knew it was there. You could see they have way too much talent. We heard how good this defense was going to be. We just hadn't seen it. And they come out and they're like, oh, hey, look, there's a real football team on the other sideline. I want to play today. And they did. And they whooped ass. It was so much fun to watch. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, not for 1 millisecond did I think we were ever in danger of losing that football game. Like, from opening kickoff, they beat the hell out of Kentucky. And, like, we haven't played like that since TCU.
I mean, for me, when Marcus Mosby-Jack Saint, when they hit Marcus Mosby-Jack Saint on the, I guess it was 30, 40-yard opening.
You mean
touchdown.
Saint Jack, like CBS calls him?
Man.
Who's the white guy?
As Brooks calls him, he's now Rojack. Is his name? I think he put that on Twitter.
Who's the white guy? Is it Chris?
That's
Doering?
very specific, Dan.
the halftime show.
Doring on ESPN.
Doring. He always calls him Saint Jack. Every time calls him Saint Jack. Rosemead St. Jack. I'm like, bro, somebody correct this dude.
Somebody get him a roster at some point. They put out like when on Georgia's roster, they give you like pronunciation guides. When you're online at Georgia's roster, they even give you audio, like so you can hear the name pronounced the correct way.
It's not that he doesn't know how to pronounce it. He says the name backwards. It's
I know.
Jack Saint.
Yeah. That's for another day here. But Dan, going off of what you said, playing at a high level, through the first 5 weeks, it was spurts. Like usually it came in the second half where Georgia played at the high level that everyone expected them to. It didn't really show that in the first half, really within the first 4 drives. But I think what's made the big difference here is Georgia had possession of the football a lot more in the first half or in the first quarter than they had in the past. Georgia had the football, had 3 possessions in the first quarter against Kentucky. They scored on all of them. They scored touchdowns on all of them. Meanwhile, Kentucky had 2 possessions, both punts. All right, Kentucky gets their first touchdown of the game in the second quarter. Georgia comes out. Georgia scored in every drive except one in the first half, and that was right before halftime, where I guess it was, or no, they did score on that drive.
No, they keep the field goal right before half.
Kick the field goal. The only one that they didn't score on, I believe they started I think it was 6 of 6 on their drives with points. That's playing at a really high level. We haven't seen that type of efficiency from a Georgia team like Dan says it's TCU, but I mean as a whole, this performance was pretty much complete. I mean when you beat a team 51-13 and you score double-digit points in 3 out of the 4 quarters, that's really good football. Really, really good football. Like, I can't come out here and nitpick that. I don't know who can. Dan, aside from Carson Beck, I want to talk receivers here because we had some conversations about this. Georgia was still trying to find who they are in the passing game. I mean, as a whole on offense, still trying to find out their identity. Obviously, they want to run the ball a lot better than they have over the first 6 games. Since Daijun Edwards has come back, they've been a lot more effective. They didn't have a rusher over the 100-yard mark by themselves this past weekend. But in the passing game, obviously Brock Bowers is still top of the stat sheet. But Georgia had 2 guys this week that really stood out to me aside from Brock Bowers. First up, Marcus Rosemead Jack Saint, 4 receptions, 99 yards, and a touchdown. That deep over that Carson Beck hit him for showed some juice, showed some that was the type of I hadn't seen that from Marcus Rosemead Jack Saint. What I've seen from Marcus Rosemead Jack Saint prior to that was he's that backside dig guy. Like he's going to go get you the tough first down. He might be able to win you a jump ball here and there, but he's not going to turn on the gas and be a yak guy. Like he's not going to be the yards after the catch guy. He showed us that. And then Ra Thomas, the transfer. We've seen a lot of Dominic Lovett over the first few weeks of the season. Ra Thomas had his coming out party here in Athens. 5 receptions, 63 yards. Had the beautiful, beautiful touchdown catch, Dan. When I think X receivers, I think of George Pickens, A.J. Green, Calvin Johnson. Those guys that can go up over the top and make the play on the defense in a tough, 50-50 ball, one-on-one coverage. That's exactly what Ra Thomas did in the end zone, right up against the pylon. I mean, that dude, Kirby Smart said it in postgame, if he can establish himself as the X receiver, it changes the game for that offense.
Yeah, it does. And, the crazy part is our best wide receiver is supposed to be Ladd McConkey, and he hasn't done jack squat this year. So, I think it's been kind of a blessing in disguise, and we've been talking about it all year long, is that Georgia was, and you almost can't even argue against it, Georgia has got to be probably the most banged up team in the country. And yes, we have struggled overcoming some of those injuries, but one of the great benefits of that is guys are learning how to play, and they're having to play. They're being forced into positions to play. We are, like, you and I were talking about this a little bit off, is that the first couple of games, we didn't go to Bowers a lot. We didn't rely on Bowers. We forced other people to kind of grow up, and maybe it didn't look good. Maybe the results weren't great, but I think we're going to see the benefit of that now, because when you factor in a fully healthy, and we don't know that he was ever hurt, but I think we both assume Brock was dinged up somehow, some type of way. And, you're starting to get these guys back healthy, and all these other guys that were that were playing and performing in the past, they're like, hey, like, don't forget about us. Like, we're still here. We can play. And I think that was really cool to see Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint get involved in the offense because, I mean, and I know it's so long ago and it's almost like cliche to say it now, but like that Florida game where he broke his leg, he was really coming on. And I was holding out hope that he would be one of those guys. And he's coming back. And like you said, Ra Thomas getting involved, much more of an active part. And I had some choice comments about him in the chat, our private chat, because ESPN decided to show back-to-back replays where he was dogging it. But like, I don't know. I was just in a place right there, and then when you go back and watch it in the context of the game, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So overreaction, Dan may have got in the way there, but he actually played a really, really good football game. And I think one of the cool things too is Daijun getting a lot of action out of the backfield with 6 receptions. And that's something that Kenny McIntosh did really, really well for us last year. And I think I'm not going to say there 100% was, but I want to say that there was a question about which one of these backs would be best out of the backfield. And I think a lot of people were saying it was going to be Kendall Milton would be the best out of the backfield. But I think Daijun has shown that he's a willing and capable receiver out of the backfield, which is great. I think Daijun has just proved that, like, we're kind of in a situation right now with him where we're almost back to the Todd Gurley days when it was, hey, it's Todd Gurley and F everybody else, give him the ball and let him go. And I think we're right there right now. Although I really would love to see Dylan Bell get a lot more carries because I think he has been really, really good in the backfield. He did have that long run that was called back. So Harrison, I have a little bit of faith. Like Andrew Paul, to me, doesn't have that juice, and I think
at least,
just yet, because I think he's still not 100% recovered from that knee, and he's got to get that confidence back. Because unfortunately for us, we never got to see him in that spring practice because we don't get, like, they don't let anybody view that stuff. But all of the information coming out of that was he was tearing it up until he tore his ACL, and so he's maybe not 100% back yet. So I would hate to have an opinion on a guy that I don't think we've seen the best of yet, but Daijun has looked amazing, and I really think we need to see a lot more Dylan Bell, especially out of the backfield, because we already know he's a wide receiver, so why not, right?
I'm with you on it, Dan. Can we get Dylan Bell a new number, please? Like,
yes,
it can still be a double digit. I propose number 10.
There's got to be a 10 already.
Yeah, there has to be. I think one of the freshmen has it. But yeah, we got to get Dylan Bell a new number, man. Even if I know Dominic Love has 6'6" would have been fine. Get him out of 86, man. Let him be a full-time back. And I know they don't want to transition to full-time back just yet because they still need him at receiver. But man, if he continues to get used the way he's being used now, I mean, we're talking about somebody that's kind of being used in how San Fran uses Deebo Samuel. I'm not saying it's Deebo Samuel, but it's very much the same role of where he's playing out of the backfield just as much as he is in the slot and out wide. So, Dan, everybody, we talked about it at length last week. Well, it was about Georgia's defense, and in particular that Georgia, is finally seeing a drop-off in the production that they had over the last 2 years in regards to putting guys in the NFL draft. They absolutely just stepped on that narrative, just stomped it out. Now, it is true. Styles make fights, and the way Kentucky plays offense isn't really the style that, we've seen be used against Georgia effectively. And that's why I'm still bullish on Michigan. I know Michigan is playing whatever the heck their schedule is right now, and they're rolling through folks. But when you look at Michigan style and Georgia style is very similar. It's the bully ball. It's we're gonna out physical teams. We're gonna out talent teams. To beat Georgia, at least the recent history suggested, not only do you have to be able to win at the line of scrimmage against Georgia, that goes for every game, but you got to have the athletes out wide. Like, you got to have some horses out there. I'm talking Marvin Harrison, Jameson Williams, John Mechie, Devontae Smith, those type of NFL day one starters. I'm bullish here on Michigan still, and we'll talk about Michigan at some point. There were some comments about that. Maybe we'll get into that in our next segment before we wrap it up. But Kentucky just doesn't have that right now. And I don't know if they ever will, Dan. Like, they are a downhill football team. They aren't the same style of offense that Georgia faced against Auburn. Auburn was Auburn wasn't trying to pound the rock in the sense that they were trying to win up the middle and in between the tackles. They were trying to get to the edge against Georgia. And Kentucky's just a downhill football team. Like, we're going to run between the tackles. We're going to try to be more physical with you. And that didn't really work out for them. They rushed for just 55 yards. Their running back that had, I think it was over 200 yards against Florida, had 59 yards against Georgia on Saturday. Dan, I mean, does this comfort you that Georgia's defense did turn it on and held an opponent 13 points? Or is this kind of like, I'm going to wait and see real quick before I come out here and say, Georgia's back to that standard?
I don't know that we're 100% back to the standard because, we made Kentucky one-dimensional. When you make a team one-dimensional, you're allowed to have a lot more success on defense. And the way we were scoring, they weren't allowed to do what they wanted to do, which is run the football, establish the run. They actually had to try to play catch up as fast as possible to stay in the game. So I think that's a product of it, but give Georgia credit. They made plays when they needed to make plays. They got off the field. That's one of the things we were asking is get off the field. They flipped that time of possession, and they really didn't give up a lot of really big plays. So I was happy with what I saw out of the defense. I like you said in our pre-show meeting, is that if you're nitpicking or if you're trying to if you're complaining about this game in any way, shape, or form, you're just born to complain. That's all you want to do is complain anyway, because there's very little to complain about in this football game. I don't think we can make any definitive statements as far as how the future is going to play out on this football game, other than what I've been saying all year is that, to me, this is a group that when they want to play, they're going to look really good. And when they don't want to play, they're going to look, but they're going to win every game. So it doesn't matter.
I think this week's going to be a good test for Georgia because you're coming up against another SEC opponent, but one that's not
Shut
really
your
good.
damn mouth.
No. You didn't let me finish. Hold up.
I'm not going to let you finish.
Hold up. No.
Crazy.
I'm talking about a bad opponent in the sense that Georgia's going to be tested in the sense of, is this a team, like you've been saying, that when they turn it on is really good, and when they don't really turn it on, they kind of skate by, is what I'm saying. Like, we're going to know if last week's going to be the standard for the rest of the season against everybody they play, or if it's going to go back to, we're going to have a slow start in the first quarter, really not going to get interested in this game or look interested until second quarter and beyond. In Vanderbilt, I'm very interested to see how this game plays out, considering Georgia turned it on against a ranked opponent a week ago. Is this maybe a game where you walk in there and say, okay, we're going to beat this team even if we don't play for the first two quarters? Dan, continue on this defense. I'm kind of looking ahead here at the teams we play next. There's another Kentucky-style matchup that I think we'll be able to see even a little bit more about how Georgia's defense is. Like Florida, to me, I don't think Florida's offense is really the same as Auburn's. When I watch Florida's offense, I don't see them doing a lot of the same thing Hugh Freeze does. I think they're a little bit built in the same mold as Kentucky. They don't have the guys up front that Georgia does. They may have that on defense right now or developing into that on defense, but on offense, I don't look at that offensive line as really great. But they got two running backs that have had great success in the SEC so far. I'm really looking forward to that matchup. I know Florida wasn't really expected to be very good this year. Obviously, they got boat raced by Kentucky. But that should be another matchup that I'm going to watch closely when in regards to Georgia's run defense. Obviously, you play Ole Miss, who with Quinshon Judkins is going to run the football. Tennessee, you talk about offenses where you need to make them one-dimensional. What's the first key people talk about, Dan, with Tennessee? It's you got to stop the run with your front seven. If you can't stop the run with your front seven, you don't stand a very good chance of beating that Tennessee team very convincingly. That's what Georgia's done in the past few years against Tennessee. They've shut down the run and basically just honed in on the pass from there on because you're forcing them to be one-dimensional and play your style of football. Dan, I got another topic. A topic we were meant to do before we hit Georgia, but I forgot because I wasn't looking at the notes and totally blew past it.
Before you start that, we said Dylan Bell needs a new number, and I went through all the numbers. That's what I was doing while you were talking. 24, 25, or 27. He could have one of those numbers. Outside of that, it's a 40 or higher. So between 0 and 30 something, he's got 24, 25, or 27. And 24 would look good on him. I'm just saying. Go ahead. I know you want to
I
talk
can go
about
for 24.
Bammer. You want to talk
I
about
can
the
go for-
Gumps. Let's talk
I can
about
go
some
for 24.
Gumps.
Yeah, let's talk about the Gumps. Dan, how much of this game did you watch? And if so, actually, I'll set you up better. That's a terrible loop. That loop just went out of bounds. That alley oop I just threw up to you. Dan, let's do this again. Dan, Alabama beat Texas A&M. This is another game that ever since Jimbo wanted to talk some crap, and actually beat Saban, it's been on the map now. It's everybody circles it. Jimbo versus Nick. It is, everybody builds up as game of the year till it's not. And Alabama went in there and went on the road and beat Texas A&M, and now the narrative is Alabama's back. Like, if you wanted to get Alabama, they ain't gonna get got until at earliest the SEC championship game where they supposedly could play Georgia. How does that make you feel? Because they're 5-1, they lost to Texas, they beat Ole Miss, you beat Texas A&M. Is it? I mean, are we going from now watching Alabama because they're on upset alert to we're just going to watch Alabama because they're Alabama?
Right. So, first of all, you butchered this whole segment. This is the national obsession. And the national obsession this week is that Alabama's back, baby. And if you paid attention all off season, it was how Alabama was going to be the most dominant team in the entire country. And God almighty, don't even show up on Saturdays because Alabama's going to whoop that ass, son. And roll tide, right? And then all of a sudden they played Texas and they got beat. And there's like, well, shit, maybe Bama's not that good. And, Bama's upset alert every week. And then the following week, it was 17-3 against South Florida. And oh my God. And then they barely beat Ole Miss 24-10. Then, play a little bit better against Mississippi State 40-17. And then they beat Texas A&M. Shitty ass Texas A&M. They beat them 26-20. And all of a sudden, here they come again. ESPN with the headline, how Alabama has bounced back from shambles to take the SEC West by storm. Yeah, buddy, roll tide. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. God almighty, I hate fucking Alabama. Anyway, go ahead, Harrison.
Somebody clip that. Can we clip that? Just that whole 2-minute. Clip it. Just clip it. Somebody go ahead and do that for me, please. I don't have to go back to the timestamp and find it. Yeah, it's pretty impressive, Dan. We went from Alabama's the most dominant team, going to win the SEC, to Alabama's not going to win the SEC. They're going to underperform, back to Alabama's back, not going to get got, back to being Alabama. I'm not quite sold still on them. I know we make a big deal about their passing game and Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe had the best game of his career to this point against Texas A&M. Was highly efficient with the football. Obviously, other than the one turnover, he was 21-33, 321 passing yards, 3 tutties, and a touchdown. Rushed for negative 31 yards. Okay, I was expecting for him to put up a lot of numbers in that department.
Well, it's because he was stacked like 58 times, dude. I mean, that's why.
Yeah. So I ain't quite sold on him yet. I don't know if I ever will be. Jermaine Burton
had a hell
game
of a game.
Of his life. 9 receptions, 197 yards, 2 touchdowns.
So I can't remember who the guy is who does the halftime show. But it was the CBS halftime show. You have Chris Doering and then the other guy. I always want to say Jeremiah Trotter, but it's not Jeremiah Trotter. Who is it that does the halftime show for CBS? Who is it? Help. CBS. Who is it?
I have no clue.
Anyway, he was like, Jermaine, you're having a good game, but shut your damn mouth, is what he said at halftime of the game. And I mean, first of all, my guy is huge. I wouldn't say shit to him to begin with. But this man's talking about Jermaine Burton, shut your damn mouth. I'm like, woo! How often do you hear a media guy with that take? But he's right. I mean, he was mouthy when he was here. So you're talking about people you don't want to see have success. He's one of them for me. I'm not the guy who tries to go around talking about I don't want to see kids have success, but there was no reason for him to leave other than he just wanted to be a little petulant child, and I just hate to see him having success.
Well, I mean, that was I think that's a career high for him. 9 receptions for 197 yards, almost 200 mark. If Georgia sees him, that will be an entertaining matchup. Obviously, fans will have a fun time with that one when it comes to seeing Jermaine Burton back against UGA. Guys, that's about wrap it up for episode 104 of the Top Dog Talk podcast. Over there, it's Dan Kiley. I'm Harrison Reno. We'll be back with episode 105. Georgia plays Vanderbilt at noon. Really not much to preview in that game. I think we kind of hit it. There's a lot of questions that we still want to see answered from Georgia. Obviously, do they get up for this game? And if they do, how successful are they? Dan, I think this one's on CBS.
I do have to let you know that in back-to-back weeks, Caleb Downs has had interceptions. So that's my boy.
Anyways, boy, that I was not expecting that one. Anyways, guys, episode 104 of the Top Dog Talk podcast. I'm your host here, Serena, alongside me, Dan Kiley. Georgia, Vanderbilt, gonna be a barn burner in Nashville, baby. Let's get on. Let's get on to it. We'll see you next Tuesday.
And how about them dogs?